Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started because I know everybody's time is really valuable. Thank you for joining us today. Christian, the sound is good. You can hear me all right?
Loud
I
and
always
clear.
worry on my iPad. All right, loud and clear. So thank you for joining us today for ESEP's Deep Dive webinar. I think this is webinar number 10. We really appreciate you all visiting us. I do want to first say up front that we will have about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A. So if you do come up with a question along the way, feel free to type it in the chat box. We won't address it right away, but we will go back through the chat box and answer any questions that you may have put in there at the end, as well as, you can unmute at the end as well. So also, everybody always asks, are we going to send the presentation and are we going to send a recording? And the answer to both of those is yes. So you will get the recording at the end. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself if you want to change to the next slide. So my name is Dr. Barbara Bartles. I'm the Chief Operating Officer here at ECEPS. I manage the operation side of the house, things like data and technology management, grant management, fiscal management, etc. I've been with ECEPS for over 3 years now, and I've watched our enrollments quadruple, and therefore that has definitely required data processes and procedures to be refined, revised, all that good stuff. So I'm going to pass it on to Christian first to have him introduce himself.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Christian Martin. I'm here with the ECEPS team. I'm our Director of Operations, and I support a lot of our backend operations on Barbara's team. I also support with grant and data management. And I've been with the team for almost 2 years now. So it's been great to support here in the ECE sector. And I'll pass it back to you, Barbara.
All right. First, we want to just talk a little bit about ECEPS, what we do, who we are. And then we won't spend too much time on that, just a few slides, but we wanted to share. Myrna's raising her hand. Let me just see if she needs something in particular. Or maybe it was an accident.
Sorry,
You
it
can
was
still
an
hear me
accident.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you,
perfect.
though.
Okay, I wanted to make sure you could hear. So a little bit about ECEPS, we'll start there. Of course, with our mission, since that's our guiding light, our mission is to advance the rigorous professional development and economic well-being of those who teach, nurture, and support young children and families. We were founded in 2019 by our executive director, Dr. Randy Wolf. And since that time, ECEPS has been one of the fastest growing new and innovative sectors in the apprenticeship system. As you guys know, the apprenticeship system has been around since about 1937, I believe, and they have traditionally focused on semiconductors, manufacturing, construction, many of the things you think about when you think about the apprenticeship system. And about 10 years ago, this new and innovative sector came along, and that includes things like early care and education, healthcare, and now even you're seeing the apprenticeship model in the K through 12 system. So ECEP's role is twofold. We are both an industry intermediary and an apprenticeship sponsor, which we'll talk about more in a few minutes on the slide deck. I'll explain the difference between those two. But we are truly committed to building a professional development pathway that doesn't ignore or shy away from many of the systemic barriers that we see in the early care and education industry. We've seen that for decades now. And those include low wages, serving those from underserved and underrepresented communities, and things like that. So we are committed to that. Next slide, please. As some of you have seen, those of us who partner with us, ECEPS is known for its ECE apprenticeship programs, but what we really do falls into 3 different buckets. And the first is the apprenticeship, creating and expanding apprenticeships, as you have seen in what I just talked about. Then the second bucket is field building. And that is really meaning strategically building a national network to expand the ECE apprenticeships and elevate this industry as a workforce development priority. As you all know, without early care and education opportunities, people can't go to work. So this is a very important workforce development priority. We want to create equity-driven and effective apprenticeships specifically designed to serve our population, the ECE population. And then the third bucket you'll see is advocacy for change. And this is where we really want to promote family sustaining wages and well-paid ECE career pathways. We want to focus on achieving compensation parity with the K through 12, frankly. And in addition, we want to advocate for securing public funding. As you know, K through 12 education is publicly funded, libraries are publicly funded, colleges, community colleges, universities, they're publicly funded. So why not ECE? Next slide, please. Okay, so as I mentioned previously, ECEPS really serves two different roles. One is as a registered apprenticeship sponsor, which you see at the top there. We only sponsor programs in California right now. And the second is the industry intermediary, as you see further down on the slide. I'm going to talk a little bit more about both of those two entities that we provide. So as an RA sponsor, ECEPS has developed standards for 6 different registered apprenticeship ECE occupations. And in California, we sponsor 18 registered apprenticeship partnerships across 10 different counties. Our partnerships always include an employer and a college, and sometimes they also include community-based organizations or workforce development boards. Each registered apprenticeship partnership is a little bit different. But as you can see from the slide, right now we work with, in our sponsored programs, over 70 employers and 17 colleges and universities. We're very proud of that. And we have currently over 650 active apprentices to date, and we've had 340 completions. Overall, since we were founded, we've served over 1,000 apprentices. With our registered apprenticeship sponsored programs, ECEPS has a proven track record of serving new and incumbent workers in childcare and early learning sectors. So some of our responsibilities as a sponsor is that we, of course, you're going to hear about it today, data collection and reporting. So all of that falls on us for our projects in California. We also work with the registration of the apprentices, both at the California Division of Apprenticeship Standards and the U.S. Department of Labor. And most importantly to us, it's maintaining that fidelity to the ECEPS standards that we've developed for those various occupations. Now, our role as an industry intermediary that you see further down on the slide is we're developing this national network of programs, state leaders committed to developing and scaling and sustaining ECE apprenticeships. And right now we're working, well, ECE overall, there's about 30 states right now, we believe, that are working with ECE apprenticeships, and we are working in 17 states currently outside of California. As an industry intermediary, we provide training and technical assistance nationally to these entities to support and foster the development, design, implementation, and sustainability of their apprenticeship programs and their apprenticeship sponsorships. We also help them with the RA system and the registered apprenticeship system. They have to meet their state-specific ECE guidelines, and we support them through that. We also, I do want to add that we do have national guideline standards that have been approved by the U.S. Department of Labor. So those are available to view on the Department of Labor website. We've sent it out in our email blasts and things like that. And finally, another part of our role as an industry intermediary is really continue that field building. And that includes not only the development of ECE apprenticeships as a workforce development solution, but we do things like our boot camps. We go state to state and talk about this whole concept of how do we make this a viable apprenticeship program. And that's how we began working with other states. We also do our podcast. If you don't, Christian, you're welcome to put that in the chat if you'd like. But if you haven't listened to our podcast already, please do so and like and follow. You can find it. It's called Early Care and Education, All Things Workforce. And then finally, another aspect of our national field building is our conference on national ECE apprenticeships. This year, we're hosting that in Austin. And if you do want to register quickly, because I think we're down to about 40 spots available. So that's what we do. You could change slides, Christian. Next slide, please. And so now I really want to bring you to the heart of this call today, our field building, and that is data collection. What is it? What do you need? And when sponsoring an apprenticeship program, there's a lot of data to collect. Now, I wanted to remind you that we are in California, so our sponsored programs relate to the Division of Apprenticeship Standards here in California. Over the years, from 2019 to 2022, we really have changed how we've been tracking and maintaining this data. So we started with Excel files, then we moved on to SharePoint, and then we moved on to a product called QuickBase. And, it just becomes a lot to collect. So we eventually, in 2022, decided it was time to really focus on a data system for apprenticeships in particular, especially because, we're collecting data for the California Division of Apprenticeship Standards, as well as the US Department of Labor. So there's a lot of information in both systems and communicating to both systems and such. So we purchased a product called Build Within, and Christian is going to take over from here, and he's going to talk about Build Within and our data management, keeping in mind, again, through the lens of what we collect in California is going to be different than what if you're an SAA or OA state, have to collect. But you'll get the gist of it. And like I said, if you have questions, type them in the chat box, and we'll get to a Q&A at the end. But now I'm going to hand the mic over to Christian, who's going to share with you today's agenda, as well as the details on data collection.
All right, thank you very much, Barbara. Thanks for the rundown of ECEPS, what we do. If you're not familiar with us already, hopefully now you're a little more so. Today's agenda, we really wanted to create this webinar to help you in how do you think about the data you collect and make that process more successful, more effective. So first, what data do you collect and how for an ECE registered apprenticeship program? Then we're going to basically use ECEPS as like a live case study. We're going to demo how we do it. We have the Build Within software platform that we use. And I just want to put a little note in there. We're not trying to sell you on any particular system. Build Within is just what we kind of found works with us, but there's tons of different products out there. Next, we'll talk about data best practices, and then we'll get to the Q&A. All right, so first, in terms of what data to collect, we've thought about the data collection in terms of 8 different buckets. So I'll briefly touch on each of these next. Performance bucket, this is going to measure how successful your ECE apprenticeship program is performing. On ECEP side of things, we look at what does enrollment look like in our programs? What do completion rates look like in our programs? How many teacher permits have been acquired? Or if you're going for CDAs, it'd be CDAs. How many associate teacher degrees, how many bachelor degrees? So these all contribute to metrics towards success of your program. Next, looking at demographics, this is the individual characteristics of your participants. And knowing the ECE industry, we want to make sure that our participants are reflective of that workforce. And so that a lot of our our apprentices, they are also as diverse as the communities that they're serving. Next, OJT hours. This is an apprenticeship requirement. So depending on the standards or guidelines that you're following for your apprenticeship program, there's a certain amount of hours they need to complete with their employer in order to complete the program. And then the purple box is the related instruction hours, also a requirement for the apprenticeship program. In the guidelines, there is a certain amount of coursework that needs to be completed. That is the educational component. Many of ECEP's programs are around 2,000 hours. For our ECE apprenticeship programs. And then for the related instruction, courses will include child development courses, family child relations courses, observation, curriculum planning and implementation, things of that nature. And again, these are all specified in the standards that you're following for your program. Looking next at the green box skill gains, right? The purpose of apprenticeship program is to help upskill the workforce, and in this case, ECE apprentices. So basically how this is done is taking an initial baseline assessment at the beginning of the program to understand where they are in terms of how they are at monitoring the child or in terms of implementing curriculum. And then you'll measure that again at the end of the program to show that they've developed themselves in certain competencies. Next, the blue box, wages. It is required for all apprenticeship programs for there to be evidence that they have received a wage increase or wage progression. So basically at the beginning of the program, they'll earn an entry wage at the start of their apprenticeship program. And then by the end of the program, they will have received an increase in pay, which is great because we're helping increase the well-being of that person financially. Orange box is regards to feedback. There's always going to be opportunities for you to improve upon the way that you collect data. And it's important to engage with your stakeholders to collect feedback on what can be done better or what's already running well, so you can continue on the good. So feedback data is going to be really important. ECEPS is constantly engaging with its different partners in the apprenticeship, whether those are employers, apprentices, success coordinators, instructors, and that's really what has allowed our program to continue to grow throughout the years. In the last box, we have other. This is anything else that hasn't been discussed. In your particular context, there may be some internal data that you may also want to collect. You may have obligations to external parties of data that you need to collect for them, such as maybe different grant sources. Another thing I'll throw out there that ECEPS does is we collect consent from our participants for the use and sharing of their data, just to make sure that we're covered from a legal perspective as well. So these are kind of different buckets to look at for data collection. Next, how to collect this data. We're not going to go specifically into the weeds here because we know depending on your state or your organization and your program partnership, it's going to look different. But just to provide a general step-by-step framework, first, you're going to want to identify the type of data that you need to collect. So hopefully that last slide was a really good reference as a place to start and kind of audit. Do we have these types of data? Have we considered other types as well? Next, you'll have to determine the tools, systems, and people to collect this data. So you may need certain forms if you're enrolled at the federal level, for example, with the Department of Labor, or if you're registered at the state level. I know California has the Division of Apprenticeship Standards that has its own forms. So depending on your state context, you should be aware of those and those corresponding systems. There also may be other templates to use that would be beneficial for data collection. In terms of people, you may already have the personnel, or you may have to hire personnel. So these are other considerations to look into as well in terms of the resources that you have available. And then lastly, you'll have to train your team to collect this data efficiently. And as you develop these procedures, it's recommended to document them so that you can basically repeat them and have them improved upon with time. So the next few slides we're going to go over here. Again, I said we're going to use ECEPS as kind of like a live study example. We're going to go look at within the ECEPS context what kind of data we're collecting and when. And then I'm going to show you what that looks like within our Build Within data platform, which holds all of our ECE apprenticeship data. So first on this side at the beginning, we are collecting enrollment forms, consent forms, and then, if applicable, evidence of prior credit for the OJT component of the Registered Apprenticeship Program. So maybe they've worked with an employer previously and have done some applicable hours that would count towards this apprenticeship, or maybe they've already completed some of the child development courses that would apply for the Registered Apprenticeship, for example. And if they're a youth, we'd also collect a youth consent form if that is applicable. But in terms of the federal forms here, or the enrollment forms here, we can see we do have them complete a DOL 671, which is if your program is registered federally with the DOL. And then we have them complete our state form, which is the DAS-1 here in California. The consent forms, I mentioned earlier about our own ECEPS consent form for data use and sharing. We'll have them complete that. And also photo release. So if we do have a success story, it allows us to share about that success later. The FERPA form here is for colleges to release data on the participants that we're able to see grades, things like that. Next, we'll collect during the program competency-based assessments. Again, these are related to the skill gains. We want to show that we're upskilling the apprentices in our program. We'll collect timesheets and grades. Again, these relate to the on-the-job training hours and the related instruction hours from the classroom that they're doing with their courses. And then lastly, the pay stubs, which is to show the wage progression, that they're starting at a certain wage, and now because they have become more competent in their skill set, they're earning a higher wage by the end of the program. In terms of closing, we'll want to make sure that we have all documentation that we need, final competency assessments, pay stubs, timesheets, grades, etc. And then we'll also collect evidence of any permits or diplomas earned. Again, these are the performance pieces of data that we mentioned earlier that show the success of our program. So you'll collect those with your program likely as well. One thing I want to mention that's not shown is the feedback. We're also collecting feedback throughout the program through our various interactions here. And yeah, those are not displayed on the slide, but also very important. Next, I'm going to shift screens over to Build Within. Again, this is our data platform that we've chosen to use to manage our ECE data. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to show you what it looks like to onboard as an apprentice participant in one of our programs. So we'll go through step by step what that experience looks like and the data that we collect from that. And then I'll show you a few other parts of the platform that make managing our data really useful. So if you bear with me for a moment, I'm going to switch screens and we'll get started there.
Yeah, as Christian mentioned, it's Barbara again. Build Within is a platform we chose to use. There are others out there. I know some people have customized Salesforce. There is WorkHands, there's Apprenti, there's a few different products that are available. We chose Build Within and really have been able to customize it to meet our needs. So go ahead, Christian.
All right. So you should see on the screen my email, correct? Email's open. All right, perfect. All right, so the first thing as part of the process for a new apprentice is we will send them an invite from the Build Within system. This is generally sent out by the success coordinator or employer that they're going to be working for, and they'll say the name of the organization here, and they just have to click to start the process. Since this is a live demonstration, this is obviously all fake data, so you'll notice me typing in some fake information, but just know that for reality purposes, the participant would be typing in their actual information. All right, the first page is going to be general profile information that it's going to ask to collect. A lot of these data points that you'll see here are data points that are requirements for either the DOL 671 form for a federal program or required for your state apprenticeship agency, depending on how you have your program organized. Just gonna keep filling in information here, but you can see phone number, social security, all the basic stuff that you need. One other thing I'll say about the program in terms of why we chose to work with Build Within is that it allowed us to add some customized questions. So it's not just questions you'd see just on the DOL 671, not just questions you'd see on your state apprenticeship form, but for example, we've been able to add this as a custom question here: is English your native language? And that's because we do have an English language learner grant that we would like to collect data from, and this helps us collect data in that way. So one advantage, definitely being able to customize it here, especially as Build Within or ECEPS continues to grow into the future. All right, so you'll see that didn't take long, just a couple of minutes. Participant will add their information. And then the second part of onboarding is going to be signing all of their forms. We all know how much of a hassle it can be to try to chase down participants to get forms signed. But luckily, with Build Within, we can do this all within the same onboarding process. So I'll go ahead and do that and start signing the first form. The first form you're going to see, this is our ECEPS consent form that I mentioned earlier. Again, we have this done just to make sure that our use and sharing of the data is all covered from a legal standpoint. And this that you're seeing here is integrated with DocuSign. So if you're familiar with DocuSign, it's pretty quick and easy to go through and finish everything. Another note I'll mention is that this can all be completed from a cell phone as well. So participants don't need to have a laptop per se to do this. A cell phone or an iPad will also work for them to complete this. So just a couple more forms to complete here. And this is the kind of the most slow part of the presentation. But another thing I'll explain here is when the invite is sent out by the employer or success coordinator, they also get to fill in a few of the details that are appearing on this form and in the system. So for example, you don't want the apprentice to enter in their own wage that they're getting paid for their apprenticeship program, right? So that's something that is controlled by the success coordinator and the employer, as well as, you know, the name of the apprentice, employer, the address of the employer. There's stuff that just makes sense for that stakeholder to fill out rather than the apprentice. Okay, so we've got everything signed. Again, it's only been 5 or so minutes. and we've got all of that complete. And then the participant can anytime in the future, once they've completed the onboarding, come back to their profile, and it'll just give them a quick summary. This is like their dashboard when they log in of when they started, how many on-the-job training hours have they done, how many RTI hours have they done, and we do this by comparing records with the timesheets and the grades that we receive. So next thing I'm going to show you, now that we've completed the apprentice onboarding, I'm going to log out, and we're going to look at it from a super admin perspective, or using my credentials here. And I'll show you a few more different features of the platform that really help us data-wise. All right. Very cool. So one also really great thing, the built-in platform is able to aggregate all of our different programs, all of our apprentices, all into one system. So when I first log in, I see a dashboard, and I see all of our participants, active programs, employers, all the information's there. And if I ever need to run a report, I could do so and have that information at my fingertips, which is really nice. Since we just finished onboarding an apprentice, I want to show you what that looks like on the other end here as an admin. So I could see in this to-do list here that we have a new person who's completed their onboarding. I'll click to open it, and this is the Christian live test I just created. Now, Build Within is one of the only softwares I'm aware of right now that has a direct integration with the Rapid system. So since we do have a federally registered apprenticeship program, we use the Rapid system. And what I could do is I could review this information that the participant has submitted, make sure it all looks correct. If it's not, there's ways I can make sure I can edit it to make sure it's right. And then if it all looks good, at a click of a button, I can submit it to Rapids directly, which is great. It'll shoot over there, they'll register. I won't have to manually double enter information. So that's a huge time save. We also appreciate being able to audit things in case, for whatever reason, maybe the employer entered the wrong start date or there's something that needs to be changed. So one great benefit here is the Rapids integration. The next thing I'm going to show you, this data room is where all of the apprenticeship documents are housed. So for all of our different programs, all of our different participants, we have all of our documents in one place. So it's easy to find and search. And you see we've got these search different options at the top. And then we could also see these first three documents here. These are the documents I just signed a few minutes ago. So now I could see Christian live test, this new apprentice has completed all their forms. It's in the system. It's searchable. I could download it in the future if I need to and look at it. Perfect. So that's really great to have that all integrated as well. Another feature I'll show you, we have the Resources Hub on the left side here. And this is basically a resources library. So there are certain documents, templates, procedures, help videos, any sort of resources like that that we want to share with our employer partners, with our apprentices, other stakeholders. We can upload those into the Resources Hub here, and it's a singular place where all these stakeholders can go to access these different resources. The other thing that's great about it is that if I have to update something, maybe I create a new onboarding video because the platform's changed a little bit, I could take down the old video, upload the new video, and they'll always have the most up-to-date version of these resources available. So just to show a few examples here, we have instructions for the California CTC permit if they need to apply for that. I have an instructional video I created for a group the other day. We have our ECEP standards here, competency-based assessments, etc. And then depending on your role type, if you're an employer or apprentice, this list is going to look a little bit different because I've organized what documents should be shared with which groups, right? And the last thing I'm going to show you here with our platform, and there's tons we could go over, but we have a short amount of time, are the different kind of role types within the system. So down in this lower left corner, we can see I'm logged in as a super administrator, but they also have different levels. We saw the apprentice level after I first completed the onboarding. The apprentice just has access to see their own information, so they won't see anything else outside of the platform. There's a mentor role as well. So the mentors, once they're invited to the Build Within system by the employer, they will be assigned to particular apprentices that they're working with, and they'll have access to see their data and progress from their account. Administrators are generally the employers themselves, and they may have just a few or many apprentices working with them. So they'll be able to see the data in progress for their participants. And then for our entity, since we're sponsoring all these different programs, we want to be able to see all the data. And that's where the super admin role comes in. So I am going to leave it there. If there's questions, obviously we have time in the Q&A, but just wanted to give you a little short example of this is how ECEPS does it, and this is just what has made sense for our context, right? It may look different for you. All right, so we're going to return back to the slideshow. Just give me a minute to bring that back up. All right, then I have one more slide to share with you all before I pass it back off to Barbara. These are best practices for data management. And the way we've looked at best practices here is dividing it into 4 different areas. So the first area would be quality control measures, and included within this is standardizing your data, validating and automating data, data audits, and data training. So to link it back to what ECEPS is doing to standardize data, you see we've created a singular onboarding process. We have that email invite that comes from the system. The apprentices answer the same questions that are all the data points required for us to submit into different systems or to collect for different data purposes. So that's great because it keeps things uniform. So that's something to look at within your organization. How are you standardizing your data so it's coming in the same way? Secondly, validating and automating data. Through our onboarding process, there are fields that will bring up errors if there's a mistake in them. So for example, if they were entering in their date of birth, they can't enter that they were born in 2025, right? Because they're way too young to be an apprentice participant. The system will flag that. So it's nice to have these quality control checks already built in so that you don't have to work with the human error later in fixing that up. And then in terms of automation, we saw that with the Rapids integration that the built-in system has, we can just do a once-over check on the newly added data and then send that directly over to the Rapid system without having to enter that in manually in a separate system, which is great. Data audits, we were able to look over the data once it came in for that participant. It's also important to do that just in general within your organization for other types of data. Make sure it's always clean and pristine. And then data trainings, making sure your team is aware of the proper procedures to follow with data collection. We saw in the resources hub, I'm able to also post different files and training videos there as resources. Next quadrant, the organizing data. Probably a best practice to adopt some sort of database or CRM system. If you are smaller, you can make spreadsheets work, but to integrate all this data together, you probably want to have ways that these spreadsheets can be linked together and talk to one another, again, to eliminate double work or human errors there. In terms of developing data templates, this is a way to help your data come in the same fashion, and as well with documenting your data procedures, making sure that everyone is following the same procedures and is on the same page in terms of how this data needs to come in. For securing data, within that is included limiting access, protecting your data, and backing up your data. As we saw within the built-in system, we do have different role types that will limit access to what those users can see. So the participants can only see their own information. The employers will only see information of the apprentices within their program, etc. If you are using a spreadsheet, you may want to think about only sharing that spreadsheet with the users that need to be added to that spreadsheet. In terms of protecting data, we saw that each account in built-in requires a username and password. So this is one way to safeguard that data in there, make sure no bad users are getting to it. In a spreadsheet context, if that's what you're using, you may want to have password protections on specific spreadsheets, tabs, or cells. And then lastly, backing up your data. Your data is valuable. It shows what work you're doing. It shows your success. and you don't want to lose that. So it's important to make sure that you have a backup for this. The Build Within platform has its own, but even outside of apprenticeship data that we collect in-house, ECEPS has its own data backup in the cloud to make sure we don't lose other important information. And then the last area is the feedback loop. Again, the steps with that include engaging your stakeholders. You have apprenticeship participants, you have employers, instructors, maybe workforce development boards, other groups. It is important to figure out how you all can work together in a better fashion to improve your program and improve your results. One kind of suggestion that we've had from one of our employers for our Build Within platform was to add a tagging feature within the platform. So if you had a participant that was at a particular site within the program, you could say, okay, this is the tag for the West site, and this is the tag for the East site, or this is a participant that's part of the first cohort versus this participant's part of the second cohort. So we're continuously interacting with our different stakeholders, learning from them, and now we're working with the Build Within team to incorporate this new feedback to make this a working feature in the future. All right, well, that being said, I'm going to pass it back to Barbara. Sorry, I've been saying the word data way too much, so pass it back to you, Barbara.
Yeah, and this slide just really summarizes how you can become more involved with ECEPS. That is, definitely go to our website, and somebody can type that in the chat box. Maybe Camilla can do that. Definitely visit our website. You can join our mailing list. You can look at all the different resources we have on our website. We've been really trying to add to a library of resources there. So definitely visit our website. We have these deep dive webinars a couple times a year, and always the topic changes. So that's why I say get on our mailing list. And you'll hear about all of our different things. You can click on the link to our podcast from our website. You can view all of our different videos and see the library that we have. If you are interested in communicating with us as an industry intermediary to provide technical assistance for any new initiatives you're thinking of doing, or if you want to get a copy of our national guideline standards, you can connect with us on that. And we do have support on developing RA system and standards information, so we can support you there. And of course, our field building, as I mentioned previously, we have boot camps all over the country, and you can visit our website and go to the events tab there. And of course, our national conference in May in Austin, Texas, which is almost full. So if you want to join us, please click on the website there at the top. We have a little red click here button to register for that. Christian and I have put, next slide, our information into this slide deck, so you're welcome to reach out to us. Everybody who registered for this call will be emailed this full slide deck, and so you'll have all that information. And then we're going to open it up to questions and answers. I do want to reiterate what a great job Christian did on this, and not only what he's done on this presentation, but he really has built Build Within with the partnership that we have with Build Within to really customize our data collection. And as Christian mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, not only is this for us and our data management, but all of that information that you saw populate those forms, like the DOL form and the DAS form for the state of California, all of that is populated and signed by DocuSign, and has really made it super easy for us to collect this data in a really timely and efficient manner. And then also, all the information that we're collecting here is able to be downloaded and compiled in all the different ways that we have to compile information for our funders, which of course is a huge aspect of anything that anybody's on the operations side of the house. Constant reporting and things like that are so critical. So we have the opportunity to review the data that they're entering, fix any weird things, like if they don't put a capital letter for their first name, for example, and things like that, really just to keep the data clean and the integrity of the data well done all along the way. Like I mentioned, back in the day when I first started 2019, we were doing all of this on SharePoint, and it was not a great use of our time. We had to, dig around for grade reports and dig around for, timesheets and things like that to keep track of their 2,000 hours or their classes that they've taken. So this product has made it really seamless on how we are able to. I can ask Christian a question now and say, how many at this organization and in this program? We have 6 different programs. So it really has helped along the way. And so we're going to open it up for Q&A right now. I know Christian, Yolanda had one question during the onboarding process. Can they upload documents? I'll let you answer that, and then you guys can unmute as you see fit to ask any other question.
Sure. To get to Yolanda's question, good question. So what you saw in the demo is the current process for their onboarding. So besides signing their forms, there's no additional uploading of documents yet. But we are talking with the Build Within team. They are constantly working on improving their product, taking in ideas. So eventually participants will be able to upload their own documents. For the meantime, though, anyone who's an administrator on the account can upload a document on behalf of the participant. So that's how it's working right now.
And Yolanda, just to expand on that a little bit, the ECEPS model, for those of you who aren't our sponsored programs, the ECEPS model, we always, secure success coordinators and coaches and administrators within each of our employers who assist with all this. And then twice a year or 3 times a year, we'll say, okay, upload the classes that they just completed. And then the success coordinator supports with that. So that Christian communicates a lot with the different team members. And yes, go ahead, Christian. The question in the chat box is, do employers get onboarded onto Build Within as well?
Yes, they do. Again, it was a short demo, so we didn't have time to show everything. But yes, we do onboard our employers as well. We want to make sure we capture what program they're running, what are the start and end wages that they have registered for their wage schedules. What else? Yeah, we want to make sure that they have their profiles created so they can access the platform. Yeah, and then we'll collect, again, depending on your context, if you're federally registered, if you're state registered, you may have to collect documents from your employers for those different types of programs. So we'll make sure that we collect those employer agreements if applicable, and things of that sort.
Right. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat.
I'll add another thing, and then we'll get to, I see there's a question there. In terms of another best practice for this onboarding that we've created with the Build Within platform, we've generally seen more success being able to have all the apprentices kind of go as a group when they complete their onboarding. So basically setting up a time session where you have all 10, 20, however many apprentices together, and then a person in the room that's just there to kind of oversee everything, and they are filling out all the profile questions, they're signing all their forms. Some participants may be more digitally literate than others. But we found that with peers around or a admin person there, that this is a way to efficiently get everyone across the finish line in terms of onboarding.
Go ahead, Harry. Harry has a question for us.
Hi guys, thanks for putting this on. It's really good. I wanted to ask Christian, what were the biggest challenges in setting this system up over the last few years?
Biggest challenges, I think there's a few things. I think if you're newer to apprenticeship, I think there's a little bit of a learning curve. So you have to learn, okay, what is required, what is not. Again, you have your registration agencies that you can contact that are extremely helpful in helping you know what type of data that you need to collect. And I would say with any new product, figuring out just tweaking it right to make sure it's the most efficient way to onboard participants, or just to work the way that you want it, takes some trial and error and feedback. So we've gone through, a good amount of rounds of kind of interactions with Build Within to get the product where it is today. But ultimately, we're playing for the long term here, and in the long term, we're going to reap the benefits of saved time and a smoother process for our participants and our other stakeholders to be able to share their data with us.
Yeah, and Harry, I'll add a little bit to that as well. I think that one of the biggest challenges was finding the right product that would work for us. As you know, every single apprenticeship system, every single apprenticeship program out there runs a little bit differently and has different requirements. Every state has different requirements. And we found that the flexibility to continue to customize for us, it has been hugely beneficial. And I think that it's been slow. It's been much slower than what I was hoped for, but it's been really good. And I think that because Build Within allows us that customization, it's very helpful. And in my opinion, that's going to really help any ECE apprenticeship program across the country. So, I think that that's a really important part, is don't give up on asking for more information. And, especially like the Rapids integration, because we report all of our apprentices to the federal government through the Rapids System 671 form. That Rapids integration has saved us a ton of time. And not only that, the accuracy by doing a transfer like that, of an API transfer of data, has been extremely helpful. So, and Nika asked Christian, would a group onboarding employers as a cohort be helpful? Sure, I would say yes, but I'll let Christian expand on that. And we are always, Nika, happy to do that if your organization would like a full demo. But Christian, any more to add?
I agree. I think the only kind of challenge with that is the scheduling, making that work with all the different partners that we have. But ideally, yeah, I think it is beneficial to be doing that as a group with similar stakeholders. So yeah, I would say yes.
And then Kimberly asks, what are your best practices to help apprentices and candidates feel comfortable and safe sharing data with you?
Yeah. I would say ultimately it comes down to relationships, and do they feel that they can trust you with the data that you're sharing? I know ECEPS has spent an immense amount of time working with its different partners in its apprenticeship, actually getting some face-to-face time with different partners, and even myself and others from our office going out to the programs, interacting with some of the participants, letting you know that there's a real person behind the ask for this data, and that they're a nice person, right? And that they're trying to help you, and explaining to them what this data is doing to serve them in the program. So I think ultimately it comes down to relationships, and there's ways you could go about increasing trust.
Christian, I wonder if you could just talk very briefly and high level about the types of reports that you can generate for people managing those RAPS programs.
Yeah. In theory, you can run a report based off of any type of data point that is collected within the system. So if you wanted to look at apprentices that are specifically doing the associate teacher apprenticeship program that ECEPS has, we could specifically filter, sort, modify, and look at what that list of participants looks like. I think depending on who you are and what you're needing the data for, your kind of request for what that data will look like may be a little bit different. But at least, yeah, within the built-in platform, we're able to see our different programs broken up. We're able to see our different our employers broken up. We're able to look at different calendar years of participants. We're able to audit what documents we have and what documents we don't have, which can be extremely helpful if you're needing to look at that. So yeah, there's many possibilities there, and it's all possible.
I wanted to add a little bit to that as well, because a lot of our employer partners, for example, need reports. I'm talking yet again about the California sponsored programs that we sponsor. So we're working with our employer partners to get all this information and this data. And we've been able to really support our projects because, for example, Christian got a call from someone who has a grant, and they said, hey, can you pull my data for me? Get it into an Excel spreadsheet so I can pivot it and see, you know, the demographic information or the completion or the hours or whatever it happens to be. So we're able to support our registered apprenticeship programs, the actual entities in and of themselves, if they have a grant report that they need. And, you know, we could tell them completion rates. We could tell them how many are actively enrolled. We can tell them anything they pretty much need. So for our sponsored projects, that's been really helpful as well. And Christian does it so quickly, it just blows me away.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's really helpful to our project partners.
Yeah, and I'll say too, at least with the built-in platform, depending on your permission level. So for me as a super admin, I basically have access to every single possible report that that platform can produce. But if you're an administrator, that may be limited, and we're always open to feedback. If you're not seeing certain information displayed, we can bring that back to the build within team, and they can work on kind of getting that built out. So yeah, constant learning and development process, but ultimately it's been, you know, really helpful in terms of what we use the data for and how we support our partners with their data needs.
All right. Any other questions for us? If not, you get 7 minutes back in your day. And we appreciate you joining us today. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Probably tomorrow or the next day, we'll send a copy of this recording and the slide deck, and our emails will be in the slide deck. So thank you very much. Have a great day, everyone.